price a two-family rewire by the device method and home runs, there are several factors to consider. These include materials, labor, overhead, and profit. Following outlines a structured approach to estimating the cost of such a project. Let's begin with materials. Firstly, estimate the number of devices, which are outlets, switches, ground fault circuit interrupters, and arc fault circuit interrupters. Secondly, calculate the linear feet of Romex needed for both home runs and branch circuits. Thirdly, factor in the conduit and fittings required, particularly for any attic runs. Finally, include the cost of materials for essential components like smoke detectors, central air conditioning units, and furnaces. Next, let's examine labor. Estimate the labor hours necessary for device installation, wire pulling, and termination. Consider the complexity of the rewiring job, including factors such as accessibility and the number of floors involved. Now, let's discuss overhead and profit. Add a percentage to cover overhead expenses like insurance and administrative costs. Also, include a reasonable profit margin to ensure the financial viability of the project. With these considerations in mind, let's break down the pricing calculation into steps. 1. Determine the device costs. Establish the cost per device based on its type and quantity, and then multiply the per device cost by the total number of devices. 2. Calculate the home run and branch circuit costs. Determine the linear feet of wire needed for each circuit, and then multiply the linear feet by the cost per foot of wire. 3. Estimate the cost for conduit and fittings. Determine the amount of conduit and fittings required, and then multiply the quantity by the unit cost. 4. Calculate the material subtotal by summing up the cost of devices, home runs, conduit, and fittings. 5. Estimate the labor costs by determining the labor hours needed based on the complexity of the rewiring, and then multiply the labor hours by the hourly rate. 6. Account for overhead and profit by adding a percentage for overhead, such as 15%, and a percentage for profit, such as 20%. 7. Calculate the total cost by summing the material subtotal, labor costs, overhead, and profit. Let's consider an example calculation to illustrate these principles. Suppose there are 100 devices, with a cost of $25 per device. The home run and branch circuit wire needed is 2,000 linear feet, costing $0.50 per foot. The conduit and fittings required are 500 feet, with a cost of $2 per foot. The estimated labor hours are 200, with an hourly rate of $50. To calculate the material subtotal, multiply the number of devices by the cost per device, 100 times $25, equaling $2,500. Then, multiply the linear feet of home run wire by the cost per foot, 2,000 times $0.50, equaling $1,000. After that, multiply the amount of conduit by the cost per foot, 500 times $2, equaling $1,000. The material subtotal is the sum of these costs, $2,500 plus $1,000 plus $1,000, totaling $4,500. To calculate the labor costs, multiply the labor hours by the hourly rate, 200 hours times $50, equaling $10,000. To determine the overhead costs, take 15% of the sum of the materials subtotal and labor costs, 15% of $14,500, equaling $2,175. To calculate the profit, take 20% of the sum of the materials subtotal and labor costs, 20% of $14,500, equaling $2,900. Finally, calculate the total cost by summing the materials subtotal, labor costs, overhead, and profit, $4,500 plus $10,000 plus $2,175 plus $2,900, totaling $19,575. It is important to remember that this is just an example calculation. Actual pricing may vary significantly depending on the specific job requirements and local market conditions. Factors such as the complexity of the wiring, the accessibility of the work area, and the prevailing rates for labor and materials in your area will all influence the final price. Before making a decision, It is always recommended to obtain multiple quotes from different electrical contractors to ensure you are getting a fair and competitive price. When evaluating these quotes, be sure to carefully review the scope of work included and the materials specified to ensure that you are comparing apples to apples. Some contractors may offer lower prices by cutting corners on materials or labor, which could ultimately lead to problems down the road. In addition to the direct costs of materials and labor, it is also important to factor in indirect costs such as permits, inspections, and insurance. These costs can vary depending on your location and the specific requirements of your project. Permits and inspections are typically required to ensure that the electrical work meets local building codes and safety standards. Insurance is essential to protect you from liability in the event of an accident or injury on the job site. Finally, it is always a good idea to have a written contract with your electrical contractor that clearly outlines the scope of work, the payment schedule, and any other relevant terms and conditions. This will help to protect both you and the contractor in the event of a dispute. Some specific aspects to consider when pricing a two-family rewire include the number and type of electrical devices needed, the length and type of wiring required, and the complexity of the wiring layout. For example, if the home has a lot of recessed lighting, the cost of the wiring and labor will be higher than if it only has a few standard light fixtures. Similarly, if the wiring layout is complex and requires a lot of cutting and patching, the cost will be higher than if it is relatively straightforward. To get an accurate estimate of the cost of your two-family rewire, it is best to consult with a qualified electrical contractor who can assess your specific needs and provide you with a detailed quote. They will be able to take into account all of the relevant factors and provide you with a price that is fair and competitive. Also, consider the following when pricing a two-family rewire project. Firstly, the electrical panel. Evaluate the existing electrical panel to determine if it needs to be upgraded or replaced. If the existing panel is outdated or does not have enough capacity to handle the new electrical load, it will need to be upgraded. The cost of upgrading the electrical panel can vary depending on the size and complexity of the upgrade. Secondly, the wiring method. Determine the appropriate wiring method for the project. Romex wiring is a common and cost-effective option for residential wiring, but it may not be suitable for all applications. In some cases, conduit may be required, which can add to the cost of the project. Thirdly, the accessibility. Assess the accessibility of the wiring locations. If the wiring locations are difficult to access, it will take longer to complete the project, which will increase the labor costs. For example, if the wiring needs to be run through tight spaces or behind walls, it will be more time-consuming than if it can be easily accessed. Fourthly, the local codes. Familiarize yourself with the local electrical codes and regulations. Electrical codes vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and it is important to ensure that the wiring complies with all applicable codes. Failure to comply with electrical codes can result in fines and other penalties. Fifthly, the permits. Obtain all necessary permits before starting the project. Electrical permits are typically required for any significant electrical work, such as a two-family rewire. The cost of permits can vary depending on the jurisdiction. Sixthly, the insurance. Ensure that you have adequate insurance coverage. It is important to have insurance coverage in case of any accidents or injuries that may occur during the project. This will protect you from financial liability in the event of a claim. Seventhly, the waste disposal. Plan for waste disposal. Rewiring a two-family home will generate a significant amount of waste, such as old wiring, boxes, and other materials. You will need to dispose of this waste properly, which may involve renting a dumpster or hiring a waste disposal service. Eighthly, the unexpected issues. Be prepared for unexpected issues. Rewiring a two-family home can be complex, and it is not uncommon to encounter unexpected issues, such as hidden wiring or structural problems. It is important to have a contingency plan in place to address these issues if they arise. Ninthly, the documentation. Document everything. Keep detailed records of all aspects of the project, including the materials used, the labor hours, and any problems that were encountered. This documentation can be helpful if you need to make any future repairs or modifications to the electrical system. Lastly, consider energy efficiency. Incorporate energy-efficient measures into the project. When rewiring a two-family home, it is a good opportunity to incorporate energy-efficient measures such as installing energy-efficient lighting and appliances. This can save you money on your energy bills in the long run. By following these guidelines, you can develop an accurate and comprehensive pricing strategy for a two-family rewire project. Remember to consider all of the relevant factors and to obtain multiple quotes before making a decision. This will help to ensure that you get a fair and competitive price for the project. This process can be complex and time-consuming, but it is essential for ensuring that the project is completed safely and efficiently. A thorough understanding of these aspects will help you develop an accurate and competitive pricing strategy.